He spent 6 grueling years burying his true nature beneath layers of chemical suppressants, living as a ghost in the shadows of the city's deadliest syndicate. But Mother Nature is cruel. A single torrential downpour stripped his defenses away, and in one breath the most ruthless alpha claimed his scent. The alarm clock on the nightstand buzzed a harsh mechanical warning at exactly 4:30 in the morning. Theodore Gallagher did not groan or roll over. His eyes snapped open wide and alert in the pitch-black room. Routine was the only thing keeping him alive in a city ruled by primal instincts and organized crime. Slipping out of his sparse, neatly made bed, Theo walked barefoot into the cold bathroom, bracing himself for the daily ritual of erasure. In the modern underworld of Boston, being an unregistered Omega was tantamount to wearing a target on your back. To the Hastings Syndicate, an Omega was either a highly prized bargaining chip to be married off for territorial gains or a fragile plaything to be discarded. Theo refused to be either. For 6 years he had successfully masqueraded as a mundane, scentless beta, burying his sweet, intoxicating biology beneath layers of illegal, agonizingly potent chemical suppressants. Opening the mirrored cabinet, Theo bypassed the toothpaste and reached for a small, unlabeled amber vial. It had been synthesized by Dr. Samuel Bennett, an underground physician operating out of a dingy clinic on 4th Avenue. The serum was a closely guarded secret, a harsh astringent designed to neutralize the pheromone glands at the base of the neck and wrists. Theo soaked a cotton pad in the clear liquid and scrubbed his skin until it turned a painful, angry red. The chemical smelled faintly of bleach and sterile hospital corridors, a far cry from the rich, warm scent of honey, wild jasmine, and petrichor that naturally bloomed from his pores. After the topical neutralizer came the pills, 3 chalky bitter tablets that suppressed his heat cycle, plunging his body into an artificial permanent winter. Finally, the anchor of his disguise, a heavy-duty flesh-colored dermal patch laced with synthetic beta pheromones, slapped directly over the primary scent gland on his nape. He smoothed down the edges of the adhesive, ensuring a perfect seal before buttoning his stiff white dress shirt all the way to the collar. Looking in the mirror, Theo saw exactly what he wanted, the world to see, a tired, unremarkable corporate auditor. Theo worked at Oak Ridge Financials, a towering glass and steel monolith in the financial district that served as the primary money laundering front for the Hastings family. It was a dangerous place to hide, but it was also brilliant. No one looked for a runaway Omega, right under the nose of the city's most territorial alpha predators. Theo was exceptionally good at his job. He kept his head down, spoke only when spoken to, and let the numbers shield him from the violent men who walked the executive floors. But today the air in the office was thick and suffocating. As soon as Theo stepped off the elevator onto the 14th floor, his dormant instincts shrieked at him to run. The ambient temperature seemed to have plummeted, yet a heavy, oppressive heat radiated from the far end of the corridor. Gabriel Hastings was in the building. Gabriel was an anomaly, even among his own kind, a prime alpha who ruled his family's empire with a terrifying, icy calculation. He rarely visited the auditing floors, preferring to manage his legitimate businesses from the penthouse or his private clubs. Yet here he was, flanked by his towering enforcer, Elias Vaughan. Gabriel moved with the silent, lethal grace of an apex predator. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that clung to his broad shoulders. His dark hair immaculately styled his jaw set in a permanent, unforgiving line. Theo immediately dropped his gaze, clutching his leather briefcase against his chest as he hurried toward his cubicle. The scent of Gabriel's pheromones rolled down the hallway like a physical wave crushed Pine Needle's dark roast coffee and the metallic tang of an approaching thunderstorm. It was an alpha aura so potent It made the knees of ordinary betas tremble. Theo, whose omega biology was chemically muted but still present, felt a deep, humiliating shudder rock through his core. He clamped his jaw shut, forcing himself to take slow, shallow breaths through his mouth to avoid tasting Gabriel's scent on the air. As Theo booted up his computer, the heavy footsteps approached. Gabriel and Elias were doing a floor walkthrough, checking the morale and efficiency of their legitimate employees. Theo stared intensely at the spreadsheets on his monitor, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. "Just keep walking," Theo prayed silently. "Pass right by." The footsteps paused directly behind Theo's chair. The air grew impossibly dense. Theo could feel the heat radiating off Gabriel's massive frame. He didn't dare turn around. His fingers hovered frozen over the keyboard. The offshore accounts from the Cayman shell companies. Gabriel's voice was a low, resonant baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down Theo's spine. It rumbled through the floorboards. "Are they reconciled?" Yes, Mr. Hastings." The floor manager, a nervous beta named Thomas Reed, stammered nearby. "Gallagher here just finished the quarterly audit this morning." Gabriel leaned over slightly. The proximity was agonizing. For a terrifying, infinite second, Gabriel inhaled deeply. Theo's breath hitched. Did the patch hold? Had the morning's serum worn off too fast? Gabriel's piercing ice-blue eyes narrowed as he stared at the back of Theo's head. He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to decipher a puzzle missing a crucial piece. There was a faint, almost imperceptible frown on his handsome face. "Gallagher," Gabriel murmured, testing the name on his tongue. He leaned back, the crushing weight of his presence lifting slightly. "Efficient work. Ensure the encrypted files are sent to my private server by noon." "Yes, sir," Theo managed to whisper, keeping his eyes firmly glued to the glowing screen. Gabriel lingered for a fraction of a second longer, a strange flicker of confusion crossing his features, before he turned and stalked away, his entourage trailing behind him. Theo finally exhaled a shaky breath, slumping into his chair. His shirt was clinging to his back, soaked in cold sweat. He reached back, his fingers trembling as they brushed the stiff edge of the dermal patch beneath his collar. It had held. But the way Gabriel had paused, the way he had breathed in the air around Theo, it was a terrifyingly close call. Theo knew he couldn't push his luck forever. He needed a stronger dosage. He needed to see Dr. Bennett tonight. By 6 o'clock that evening, the skies over Boston had turned a bruised, ugly shade of purple. The weather forecast had predicted light showers, but the heavy, charged atmosphere promised something far more violent. Theo remained at his desk long after the rest of the floor had cleared out. His skin felt unnaturally hot, a dry, feverish burn that started at the nape of his neck and spread down his spine. He was experiencing a flare-up. Dr. Bennett had warned him about the side effects of prolonged suppressant use. The human body was not designed to harbor an omega's biology in a perpetual state of chemical suppression. The glands were fighting back, trying to push past the barrier of the neutralizer. Theo's hands shook as he hastily packed his briefcase. The edges of the dermal patch were itching fiercely, the adhesive weakening as a fine layer of stress-induced sweat built up beneath it. He had to get to the clinic immediately for an emergency injection, or his natural scent would break through the artificial beta masking. Theo rushed out of the Oak Ridge building, throwing his trench coat over his shoulders. The moment he pushed through the revolving glass doors, the storm unleashed its fury. It wasn't just rain, it was a torrential, blinding deluge. The wind howled through the concrete canyons of the financial district, driving sheets of freezing water sideways. Theo cursed, struggling to open his cheap umbrella. Before he could even lock the canopy into place, a vicious gust of wind inverted the metal spokes, snapping them with a sharp crack. Tossing the ruined umbrella into a nearby trash can, Theo pulled his collar up and began to jog down the flooded pavement. The clinic was 6 blocks away, nestled in an alleyway just off 4th Avenue. The cold rain slashed against his face, soaking through his coat in seconds. But it wasn't the cold that terrified Theo. It was the moisture. The neutralizing serum he applied every morning was water-soluble. It was designed to wash off easily in the shower, so it wouldn't permanently scar his skin. And the heavy-duty dermal patch on his neck relied on an adhesive that, while sweat-resistant, was never meant to withstand a direct, continuous soaking. As Theo ran, his foot caught the edge of a raised cobblestone. He stumbled, splashing down hard onto his knees in a deep, murky puddle. Muddy water splashed up his front, soaking him to the bone. He gasped in pain, scrambling to his feet, but as he did, he felt it. A cold trickle of rainwater slipped down the back of his neck, sliding perfectly beneath his collar. A sudden sharp sting erupted at his scent gland as the water interacted with the chemical adhesive. The patch, already weakened by his feverish sweat, began to peel away. No, no, no. Theo panicked, pressing a wet hand against his neck. He could feel the patch sliding, the synthetic beta pheromones washing away into the gutter. He broke into a desperate sprint, his lungs burning. He just had to make it 3 more blocks. He turned the corner onto the narrow, poorly lit stretch of Elm Street, taking a shortcut behind a row of upscale establishments. He didn't realize until he was halfway down the alley that he was running directly behind the Velvet Room, Gabriel Hastings' most exclusive private speakeasy. The heavy steel door at the back of the club swung open, spilling a rectangle of warm, golden light onto the wet asphalt. A group of men stepped out under the awning to avoid the rain, lighting cigars. At the center of them, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt, was Gabriel. Theo froze in his tracks just 20 feet away. The rain was deafening, bouncing off the dumpsters and the fire escapes, but time seemed to slow to a terrifying crawl. Theo took a step backward, intending to fade into the shadows and find another route. But it was too late. The downpour had done its job entirely. The dermal patch lost its final grip, slipping off Theo's wet skin and falling unnoticed onto the wet pavement. The chemical astringent that had bound his biology for hours was washed away completely. Freed from its 6-year prison, Theo's true nature violently reasserted itself. A massive, overwhelming wave of pure, unfiltered omega pheromones exploded into the damp night air. It was an intoxicating, dizzying scent, a rich, narcotic blend of warm, wild honey, blooming night jasmine, and the deep, earthy sweetness of petrichor. It cut through the smell of the rain, the garbage, and the cigar smoke like a sharpened blade. Under the awning, Gabriel stopped moving. The cigar slipped from his fingers, landing with a hiss in a puddle. The Alpha's head snapped up. His ice-blue eyes, usually so calm and calculating, dilated instantly, the pupils swallowing the irises until they were almost completely black. A primal, guttural growl ripped from Gabriel's chest, a sound so inhuman and terrifying that his own enforcers stepped away from him in shock. The civilized Mafia boss vanished in a millisecond, replaced entirely by a prime alpha, whose instincts had just been hit by the most potent, perfect omega scent he had ever encountered in his life. Gabriel's head swiveled, locking onto the dark figure, trembling in the rain. Theo couldn't breathe. The sheer, crushing weight of Gabriel's sudden aggressive alpha aura hit him like a freight train, locking his joints in place. It was a biological command to submit, heavy and absolute. Run, his mind screamed, but his legs felt like lead. "Boss?" Elias Vaughan asked nervously, reaching for his sidearm, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere, but unable to process the sweet scent as sharply as the prime alpha. "Don't move!" Gabriel snarled his voice, a jagged edge of pure dominance. He wasn't speaking to Elias. He was looking dead at Theo. With slow, predatory steps, Gabriel stepped out from beneath the awning and into the pouring rain. He didn't care that his expensive suit was instantly soaked. His chest heaved as he breathed in the saturated air, his eyes locked on Theo with a terrifying, consuming hunger. He was tracking the scent right to its source, connecting the dots. The unremarkable accountant from the 14th floor, the ghost who had stood just inches from him that morning. Theo's survival instinct finally overpowered his biological freeze. He spun around his wet shoes, slipping on the asphalt, and bolted back the way he came. "Catch him!" Gabriel roared over the thunder, his voice vibrating with a possessive fury that shook the alleyway. "Lock down the street. If he gets away, I'll kill you all." Theo ran blindly, tears mixing with the freezing rain. His heart hammered in his throat. He had hidden in the shadows for years, played the perfect invisible boy, all to avoid exactly this. But the rain had washed his lies away, and now the most dangerous man in the city was hunting him down, driven completely insane by a single drop of truth. The maze of Boston's historic downtown offered 1,000 places to hide, but when an enraged prime alpha was tracking your biological signature, the entire city shrank to the size of a cage. Theo's lungs burned with the metallic taste of cold air and raw adrenaline. He vaulted over a rusted chain-link fence, his wet dress pants tearing at the knee. He didn't stop. He couldn't. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit echoed off the brick walls, the heavy thud of combat boots, the frantic barking of orders over encrypted radios, and beneath it all the terrifying rhythmic footfalls of Gabriel Hastings. Gabriel was not running like a man. He was hunting like an apex predator. The scent of wild honey and jasmine had created an unbreakable, invisible tether between them. Every time Theo turned a corner, attempting to double back toward the safety of the bustling crowds near South Station, he felt the crushing weight of Gabriel's pheromones cutting off his escape routes. The alpha's scent, crushed pine and incoming storm was blanketing the blocks directing his enforcers. Theo darted into a narrow subterranean service corridor that ran beneath a cluster of high-end corporate buildings. He knew this route from his obsessive studying of the city's blueprints. It led directly toward the underground utility tunnels near the Charles River. If he could just get into the water treatment sector, the heavy chemical smells of chlorine and waste might mask his blooming Omega scent. "Cover the exits on Congress Street," a voice roared through the rain. It was Elias. "He's heading toward the tunnels." Theo's heart sank. He pushed his exhausted legs harder, splashing through ankle-deep puddles of murky water in the dim, flickering light of the corridor. He reached the heavy iron door of the utility sector, his slick, trembling fingers desperately yanking at the handle. It was locked. He slammed his shoulder against the rusted metal, letting out a choked sob of pure despair. "Going somewhere, Mr. Gallagher." The voice was a low, vibrating purr that echoed off the damp concrete walls. Theo froze, the blood draining from his face. He turned slowly. Standing at the entrance of the corridor, blocking his only exit, was Gabriel. The Mafia boss looked demonic in the dim light. His expensive suit was ruined, plastered to his muscular frame by the rain. His chest rose and fell with heavy, deliberate breaths, inhaling the concentrated Omega scent trapped in the narrow tunnel. Gabriel's eyes were completely pitch black, his pupils dilated to the absolute edge of his irises. The civilized, calculating CEO of the Hastings Syndicate was completely gone. Only the primal beast remained. Behind Gabriel, two massive enforcers wearing tactical gear bearing the insignia of Constellis, a real-world private security military contractor that the Hastings family secretly kept on retainer, stepped into view, their assault rifles lowered, but ready. "Leave us!" Gabriel commanded, not breaking eye contact with Theo. "Boss, the protocol," one of the contractors began. "I said leave us!" Gabriel snarled, a vicious wave of alpha command, rolling off him so intensely that the two heavily armed betas physically stumbled backward. They nodded hastily, retreating into the rain and sealing off the alleyway. Theo pressed his back against the cold iron door, trembling violently. He was trapped. Gabriel stepped forward, closing the distance with agonizing slowness. 6 years, he murmured, his voice laced with a dangerous mixture of awe and absolute fury. "For 6 years you sat in my building. You breathed my air. You drank my coffee. And I didn't know." Theo squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please let me go." Gabriel stopped mere inches away. The heat radiating from his massive body was overwhelming, melting the chill of the freezing rain right off Theo's skin. Gabriel reached out his large, calloused hand, gripping Theo's chin, forcing the smaller man to look at him. "Let you go," Gabriel breathed, leaning down until his nose brushed the sensitive skin just below Theo's jawline. He inhaled deeply, a shudder ripping through his massive frame. "Do you have any idea what this scent does to me? It's perfect. It's absolutely maddening." Gabriel's thumb brushed over the raw red skin on the nape of Theo's neck, exactly where the dermal patch had been washed away. Theo let out a soft, involuntary whimper at the touch. It was a sound that made Gabriel's grip tighten possessively. "But you're not just a pretty little Omega, are you, Theodore?" Gabriel's tone suddenly shifted, the primal fog in his eyes, receding just enough to let the sharp, ruthless intelligence of the Mafia boss shine through. "You think I didn't notice the discrepancies in the ledgers? You think I didn't know someone was skimming exactly 3.2% from the offshore Cayman accounts?" Theo's eyes snapped wide open in sheer terror. "The clinic. I tracked the missing funds 3 weeks ago." Gabriel continued smoothly, his thumb still stroking the frantic pulse at Theo's neck. "They were funneled through a dozen shell companies before landing in a discreet account used by an underground medical facility near 4th Avenue. I was going to have you executed on Monday for stealing from me. I thought you were just a greedy, insignificant beta." Gabriel stepped fully into Theo's space, pinning him against the iron door. "But now," the Alpha whispered, his lips grazing Theo's ear, "now I see the whole picture. You stole my money to buy the very chemicals you used to hide from me. You financed your own disappearance with my wealth. I had to—" Theo gasped, his hands coming up to weakly push against Gabriel's unyielding chest. "If you knew what I was, you would have sold me, or caged me." "Caged you?" Gabriel let out a dark, breathless laugh, his hands sliding down to grip Theo's narrow waist. "Oh, little ghost, you have no idea what I'm going to do with you now. The man who can outsmart the Hastings financial empire and hide his biology from a prime alpha isn't going to be sold." Before Theo could formulate a response, the heavy metal door behind him suddenly rattled, violently, followed by the deafening roar of a localized explosion that shook the very foundations of the alleyway. The concussive force of the blast threw them both forward. Gabriel reacted with terrifying speed, wrapping his massive arms around Theo and spinning them around, taking the brunt of the shockwave against his own back. Concrete dust and debris rained down upon them as the iron door buckled inward. "Ambush!" Elias's voice screamed over the radio, clipped to Gabriel's belt. "Boss, it's the Ivanov Bratva. They tracked the security anomaly." The scent of blood, gunpowder, and raw ozone instantly flooded the tunnel, clashing violently with Theo's sweet Omega pheromones. The Ivanovs were the Hastings Syndicate's most vicious rivals, and a massive surge of unmasked Omega scent in the middle of neutral territory was like throwing chum into shark-infested waters. They hadn't just come to kill Gabriel, they had come to claim the prize he had just unearthed. Gabriel hauled Theo to his feet. "Stay behind me," he growled, pulling a heavy matte black sidearm from his shoulder holster. 3 figures stepped through the smoke of the blown doorway, wearing tactical masks and wielding heavy artillery. Before they could even raise their weapons, Gabriel fired. 3 shots rang out in rapid succession, precise and lethal, dropping the attackers instantly. But more footsteps were echoing down the tunnel. "We can't hold them here," Gabriel muttered, gripping Theo's wrist with a bruised, iron-tight grip. He dragged the terrified Omega back up the service corridor, firing blindly behind them to keep the advancing mob at bay. For the next 20 minutes, Theo experienced the true terrifying reality of the underworld he had only ever seen on spreadsheets. They fought their way through the subterranean levels of the city, Gabriel acting as an impenetrable, lethal shield. Every time an Ivanov soldier got close, driven half-mad by the lingering scent of Theo's distress pheromones, Gabriel dispatched them with a brutal, possessive fury. The Prime Alpha was protecting his mate, even if the bond had not yet been formally claimed. They finally breached the surface through a service grate near the Boston Public Garden, where Elias and a convoy of heavily armored SUVs were waiting. Gabriel shoved Theo into the back of a bulletproof Cadillac Escalade, climbing in right behind him and slamming the heavy door shut. "Drive. Get us to the Beacon Hill estate. Now!" Gabriel barked, reloading his weapon. As the convoy peeled away into the rainy night, the adrenaline finally began to crash out of Theo's system. He huddled in the corner of the luxurious leather seats, shivering uncontrollably, his clothes ruined, and his skin bruised. He looked over at Gabriel. The Alpha was bleeding from a deep graze on his left bicep, his ruined suit jacket discarded on the floorboards. Gabriel turned his head, his ice-blue eyes locking onto Theo in the dim glow of the streetlights flashing by. The feral hostility was gone, replaced by a heavy, calculating stillness. "You're bleeding," Theo whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the Alpha's arm. "It's nothing," Gabriel replied flatly. He reached into a hidden compartment in the armrest, pulling out a thick, dry cashmere blanket and tossing it over Theo's shivering frame. "Wrap up. The suppressant withdrawal is going to trigger a fever." Theo clutched the blanket, his mind spinning. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Are you going to lock me up?" Gabriel sighed, leaning back against the leather. He reached out his fingers, gently brushing a wet strand of hair from Theo's forehead. The touch was surprisingly tender, completely at odds with the massacre he had just committed. "You stole $3 million from me, Theodore," Gabriel said quietly. "In my world, that is a death sentence. And your biology, an unregistered, unbound Omega, with a scent like yours, the Ivanovs will burn this city to the ground to drag you out of it. You can never go back to your little apartment. You can never go back to being a ghost." Tears welled up in Theo's eyes. "So I'm just a prisoner." "No," Gabriel corrected, his gaze intense. "You are an asset, a brilliant, devious, and incredibly brave asset. You managed to hide from me for 6 years. You audited the unauditable. I don't want to cage a mind like that. I want to use it." Gabriel leaned closer, the scent of crushed pine enveloping Theo in a protective, heavy blanket of alpha pheromones. "Here is the deal, little ghost. You are going to work for me, directly. You will sit in my penthouse, you will dismantle the Ivanovs' financial network, and you will clean my money better than any beta ever could. In return, I will give you the one thing you have never had." "What's that?" Theo breathed. "Absolute protection." Gabriel vowed, his eyes flashing with utter conviction. "No suppressants, no hiding. You will live as an Omega, and I will personally slaughter anyone who dares to look at you twice. You will be safe, Theodore, as long as you are mine." Theo looked into the icy depths of Gabriel's eyes. He saw the possessiveness, the danger, and the inescapable truth. The rain had washed away his disguise, and with it his old life. He was no longer the invisible boy. He was the most dangerous weapon in the Hastings Syndicate, and the only man who could keep him alive was the monster who had caught him. Slowly, his hands shaking, Theo reached out and gently rested his fingers against Gabriel's bleeding arm. "Okay," Theo whispered, sealing his fate. "I'm yours." The storm washed away the lies, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of survival and desire in its wake. Theo's journey from a hidden, terrified auditor to the brilliant, untouchable Omega of Boston's most feared Mafia. Boss proves that sometimes the very things we try to suppress become our ultimate power. Did this intense Omegaverse Mafia thriller keep you on the edge of your seat? Like this video, share it with your fellow fiction lovers, and subscribe for more heart-pounding stories.